I'm going to walk through the 4 vision items that we've created, which are captured on this vision issue, and you can reference them here. On this issue are the 4 vision items that we have identified, along with the mockups, clickable prototype, and the Figma file. So all of that information is visible on this issue if anyone needs it. And I'll start with this first vision item. And I guess I should just say before I walk through that all of this is, the mockups are really to illustrate the general direction and idea, but all of this is very much subject to change in terms of the interaction and the UI patterns. We need to do a lot more research and understanding about what people want and how they're going to use them. So it's mostly just meant to communicate the general direction and idea. So this first item is to introduce an incident timeline to incidents. And the goal is just to allow people to easily create an editable timeline on incidents. So the first step here would be to introduce a timeline tab on incidents so people can easily kind of see and access the timeline and not have to dig through all of the comments and system notes and everything when they want to see what happened. And in order for people to be able to easily add comment items to the timeline, this first suggestion, and again, not final solution, is to add a drop-down item allowing people to add individual comments and pieces of threads of comments to the timeline in that drop-down. And if they do that, here's how it would look. They would just kind of show up at the bottom of the timeline, and system notes at this point would be added automatically, though there was some discussion in the team as to whether we actually want to do that or not. On the timeline, we'll have the time stamp and the system note or whatever content. We'll have some sort of a button to add additional items to the timeline if they want to, and some different sorting options. And again, these are all TBC, but some ideas just to get us thinking, sorting by oldest, newest, comments only. I don't know if this is going to be necessary or not, but some people were saying that, we might have a lot of system notes and it could get very noisy. Maybe they only want to see the comments. So maybe we have that be an option. And there is also the feedback that maybe we want to have starred items. Like, again, if it gets really noisy, maybe people want to star specific items in the timeline and then only view those. So that's another possible option that we could do.
Yeah, those are 2 great ones from a competitive standpoint across the space. Being able to filter by, it's important to have record of all of the notes, but potentially just want user activity. So that's fantastic.
Okay, great.
One thing about system notes is I can definitely see there's different systems notes being really useful, such as recording the time when the incident is officially started. So if the incident is created on 2021, May 2nd at 4 p.m., that's a useful piece of information. But system notes such as K2 edited the description, completely useless in your timeline. So I think if you tease out exactly what system notes will be useful, I would be surprised if people find that not useful in an incident timeline.
That's a really great point. And somebody also brought up like labels. If somebody's adding and removing a bunch of labels, they don't want to see that in their incident timeline. And I don't know how much granularity, how much control we have over those system notes and how easily we can pull them in and out. So that's definitely like a technical discussion we'll need to have, because I'm not sure yet. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay. We also were talking about having these items be editable. And there was some discussion in the team as to which items should be editable. For instance, should we only allow people to edit the comments that have been added, or should we actually allow them to edit the system notes? Is that kosher for an incident timeline? And things like, the timestamp and stuff probably shouldn't be editable. So I think there's a lot of conversations there that we probably still need to have. But the assumption is that pieces of this will need to be editable and rearrangeable so that people can actually pin down an accurate timeline and have more of a discussion about how things occurred and when. So I think some of the options I had here, that on hover, we can have some quick actions. For example, the starring of items, the editing or deleting. And if people do choose to edit, they can save or cancel their changes. And if they have made changes to the note or the comment, we can have like an undo button as well. So there'll be some ability to edit and modify that content as needed. Any thoughts on this first vision item?
Oh, that was great.
Okay, great. All right, so the second vision item is introducing incident reporting. And the goal here is to allow people to create an incident report from an incident. And in the feedback, there's some discussion about whether we should be creating an incident report automatically for people once the status of an incident goes to resolved, for example. When we've talked to users, I don't know that everyone's going to want to do an incident review for every incident that's created. So I'm not sure. We'll probably have to do some more research on that and on how it's created. So at this point, I'll just show an example of how we can more closely create incident report from an incident, and we can kind of fill in those details as we look into this more fully. So the initial suggestion for the kind of UI interaction would be to have an additional menu option here. We already have new issue and promotes Epic, but creating an additional one for creating a post-incident review. And the hope is that we could pull some of this incident content directly into the incident review so that some of that can be automated. When the incident report is created, the thought would be that it could create, or it could include the incident timeline, a section for actions taken and action items, and also linked. So linked instance, linked incident reviews, things like that. At this point, I don't know if this should be an issue type or an issue template. An issue template is a lot easier especially for like an MVC point of view, but an issue type would allow us a lot more flexibility in terms of how we can modify this. For example, if we have an issue type, we can have these sections be tabs, which might be nice. Just in terms of the incident timeline could be very long. And that could be a very long issue description if all of that content is in there and we can't do much with it. Maybe we can have it be collapsible or something like that. So there's definitely some things we'll need to consider here. But the idea is that we'll include these 3 sections for people to populate. And as people are discussing in the comment thread what happened and what they did and the actions that they took, the hope would be that they could easily add those discussion points as action items or as actions taken. And again, I don't know if this is the best way to do this at this point. I think in the feedback, some people suggested maybe having a slash comment, maybe that's easier. I think we can discuss all of that and find the most relevant way to surface those actions. I think the idea here is just that we will have an easy way to add these items from the discussion up here so that people don't have to discuss them and then like copy and paste them up into the discussion. And the hope would also be that once this is the original incident and once the incident report is created, that it's also easy to add things from the original incident into the incident report. And again, this is just a suggestion to illustrate the idea at this point, add action item to the review. I don't know that that's going to be the final way that we do that, but the idea is just that as people are taking actions on the incident, if it's important and they know it's going to need to be captured in the incident review, that they can do that directly from the incident and that content will be ported over. So those are the first thoughts on the incident review. And I guess one other thing that the team brought up is a couple of people brought up the naming, incident review versus postmortem. I know postmortem is also a very standard term. I don't know if we have thoughts on the naming there, but there might need to be a discussion with the team, or the team might want to have that discussion about what
We
call.
transitioned from postmortem to post-incident review 2 years ago.
Okay.
And so that's the industry. That's the other industry standard term. People don't like the use of postmortem because it has a very negative connotation.
Very morbid.
Yeah.
I remember having those discussions, but it came up a lot in the team comments. So just kind of flagging that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Close these out. And the third vision item, improving the settings for incident management. So I think that there's kind of 3 goals here: improving the access to the settings, cleaning up the existing settings page, and then introducing more granular permissions for incidents. And I'll show you what those look like. So improving access to the settings page, we could do that pretty easily just by having kind of a link to the settings page from the list pages. Right now we don't. So people just have to kind of know where to find it. We could certainly make it easier for people to find those settings and adjust them, and to add additional integrations and things like that by adding a button to the settings page from the list pages. In terms of cleaning up the settings page, right now that the settings section is called incidents, but it's actually all of the incident management settings. So even just updating that title, I think, would be a big help. We also have, I think, 2 different sections in here. Like one's what happens when an alert comes in, and another is about the SLA timer. But all of those are just kind of incident settings. So we can kind of combine those sections into one and clean that up a bit, and decrease the number of tabs. And I know there's been some discussion about Grafana authentication and whether it should exist in this section. I have it in here because that's something that we've talked about, because the Grafana embedding of charts is primarily used for the incident management workflow. Whether that should be there, I think there's like still more discussion, it sounds like, that we want to do. I would say that the introduction of the search bar at the top of all the settings page probably makes that easier to find, regardless of where we have it now. But I think cleaning up this settings page, I think, would also help people as they're setting up incident management. And the third one is to introduce incident management permissions. So for certain actions, only people of certain roles can take them. And I think this would be a pretty huge thing for us. I don't know at this point where this section should live, and there's a lot of debate in other groups about these cascading settings and where they should live. So right now I have it in the admin settings page. I don't know that that's going to be the final location for it, and I think that's all kind of still under discussion. But the hope is just that we will allow people to take actions on alerts and incidents based on their role. So it won't just be kind of, right now it's a little bit more of a free-for-all. So hopefully that this would tighten up the experience for people using incident management in GitLab. Any thoughts on that?
I really like the setting gear button in the alerts list. Is there would that be the first introduction of such a concept in GitLab?
We have something similar on the metrics page, on the metrics dashboard now. So okay. Yeah, not the first example. And I know there's also a lot of other conversations happening about the left nav and whether the settings should actually move up into the individual nav items. So that would also probably help solve that problem if the operation settings was within operations or monitoring, whatever it ends up being called in the future.
What do you know of a downside to introducing, just linking the settings directly on the page where you would take action?
I don't know if there's I see fewer downsides to that than to moving the settings pages for each section into each section, because for me that is assuming that people who are using the different pieces of GitLab, that they're only using one section of the navigation, which I don't think is the case. So for me, introducing that the link is a more minimal and more useful change than moving the settings, the whole settings section up into our little section of the nav. That feels like a bigger and slightly more controversial move from the perspective of someone who's using many pieces of GitLab.
Thank you.
The fourth vision item is introducing dashboards. This is something that came up, I think, a lot in our user interviews, but we haven't really touched at all yet. So I will show you those. And the goal is to allow people to track key metrics for incidents and on-call schedules. So here's an example dashboard for incident management, kind of telling people what the total alerts are, and the mean time to resolution, and having some different metrics. And the SQL report could perhaps link to a table with more data, so people can really dig into how things are changing and tracking over time in terms of your incident resolution and the number of alerts that are coming in, so people can have more of an overview. And right now I have this under analytics section. And there was some feedback from the team that I think that might not be the best place for it. So I think just kind of flagging that we'll have to do some more investigation in terms of where these dashboards should live. But it does seem like we've had feedback from our users that this is an important thing for them to be able to track how they're resolving incidents over time.
And the background for it living under analytics right now is that's kind of the data foundation of the platform, and where we're doing a lot of the value stream management work, and where our current GitLab SRE team has dashboards built for their incident metrics. So I think it also depends on the whole analytics strategy of GitLab as a whole. You know, if that's where you go for each stage to look at analytics dashboards, maybe it does make sense.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think somebody from one of the engineers was saying that that's more like they build their own dashboards there or something like that versus like out of the box ones. And
yeah,
would that be changing the pattern to have an out of the box dashboard there? And I'm not sure about those pieces yet. I think we definitely need to have more discussion around that. And I'm not sure if you have
we do have dashboards there, depending on your tier, but it's obviously all based on issues and MRs.
Okay.
But yes, anyways, looking good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. And the other one is, I think I have both. Looks like I've saved both of them. Both of them are the incident management dashboard. I'll clean that one up, but also having a similar dashboard for on-call scheduling, letting people know how many people have been on call, how long they've been on call for on average. In fact, I probably have that here, which I can just zoom in and show you real quick. There you go. On-call dashboard. Yeah, average on-call hours, total people on call, number of alerts per shift, and number of incidents per shift, just allowing people to have better visibility in terms of how long people are on call and how they're resolving alerts and incidents and things like that. So,
yeah, super useful for management to understand the load they're placing on people, and also really helpful metrics for looking at the impact of new tools or changing processes, or being able to have data for which managers can advocate for those things, for additional resources or budget for new stuff. So cool. Thanks, Amelia.
Sure. Any final thoughts or questions on this before we wrap it up?
What Sarah said at the end is really important. Many teams now subscribe to the model of having incident budget. So there's actually a direct link to something that's made a strategic and financial decision at the e-group level, and tying that to how teams are responding and what they're spending their time and how they're spending that money. That's a huge deal. And just to me, that goes directly to like a very enterprising set of features that
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of people are asking for.
Great, that's good to know. Yeah. Any final thoughts, or should I stop recording?
Yeah, I think we can stop the recording.
Okay.